cave which has now been declared a public hazard after a young father died inside.
So the reason I kept pushing is I thought it was going to get wider.
You need to breathe off this regulator.
Hello you demons, and happy Friday. Previously, we dived into how the caves of this earth beckon us into their deadly embrace like sirens. Today, I will be looking over the unfortunate cases of those who did not make it back from their expeditions. As we know, spelunking is no easy task, even for professionals. So I thought it appropriate to start off with a story of daring adventures that simply lacked the skill and experience. In 2005, 4 explorers in Provo, Utah came across an old mine shaft on Y Mountain they ironically named the Cave of Death the previous day. The 4 of them took the dive at about 4:30 a.m., leaving one friend behind due to his personal concerns. Without any diving equipment, the group ventured into the underwater portions of the caves, holding their breaths till they could pop up under a pocket of air along their route deeper into the cave. However, what I don't think they accounted for was that the submerged portion was not only pitch black, but also 15 feet long. After nearly an hour of silence, their friend that stayed behind called the authorities for an emergency rescue. Immediately, they began pumping water out of the cave and oxygen into it in hopes of giving them a chance. Sadly, despite responders' best attempts, none of them made it. Through investigations, it was discovered that they may have actually drowned on their return. One of their friends is speculated to have blocked the exit for the others after drowning. Later accounts from experienced splunkers even state that there's a difficult to navigate fork in the paths leading back into the exit. One even overshot the exit and had to reroute backwards to reorient himself. However, after this event, the tunnel was sealed to prevent any further accidental deaths. One can only imagine the stresses on both the survivors and the one who's waiting on the return. However, in our next case, it is the bold spelunkers who dove that would return to search for help. Across the world in Rana, Norway, a similar story occurred on February 6, 2014. In a system of tunnels known as Plura Cave, 5 Finnish divers would enjoy a beautifully alluring underwater passage stretching 9,800 feet in length. As the team plunged forward into darkness, they would be met with complex and narrow tunnels that only became more frequent. Only an hour later, while in the deepest section of the cave, a horrifying realization occurred. Their friend who was new to diving was no longer behind them. Upon investigating, he was found tangled up in diving cords, panicking, using his flashlight to signal for help. Unfortunately, while trying to free him and change out his mouthpiece, he had taken up too much water into his lungs and perished. Unable to successfully remove the body of their friend, and with time against them, the group had to return to the surface as quickly as possible, giving themselves the bends, but recovering. However, sadly, their friend's body being stuck in a narrow passage would tangle a diver from a separate diving group, causing them to drown in the cave as well. With 2 bodies now stuck in Plura Cave, the police contacted the cave diving specialist, Sami Parkin, to assist them in the recovery of these bodies. Upon investigating, it was determined by the police that the recovery of the 2 bodies would be deemed too risky. Hearing this, the 3 of the original divers were unsatisfied with the conclusion and all agreed to take the plunge one more time. But this time, with the help of Sami Parkin. In an act of true bravery and selflessness, they would return to their friend where they had last left him and cut the lines tangling him. Finally, freeing him and recovering the other body, they returned to the surface and let the police know that they could pick up the bodies of the divers for proper burial. With the families at peace and finally being able to feel comfort with the idea that their loved ones were no longer trapped in a heartless cave, the recovery divers celebrated their actions with a moment of silence in an open portion of the cave. The divers faced no charges for their illegal dive, and one was even given the first-class medal of the White Rose of Finland. As incredible of a story as it was, with such a dark beginning, that would not stop future accidents from occurring in Plura Cave. As of April 3rd, 2024, it would sadly claim the life of another diver, however this time recoverable. One can only imagine the fear that almost overrides your motor functions as you naturally do whatever it takes to survive. As we will see with these cases, they almost follow a conducted series of events that only escalate the danger. A morbid example of this is the tragedy that occurred in the Mossdale Caverns in the UK. In 1962, on June 24th, a team of 10 divers set to explore this 6.5-mile-long cave. Due to the dangers of this cave that it posed, especially with one entrance, everything was planned accordingly, down to the weather. With the possibility of flooding, the team took advantage of the season's dry spell and entered the cave. A few hours into the dive, 4 of the explorers from the original team returned to their camp. However, one of them noticed something horrifying. A single drop of rain had hit her head. She immediately ran to the cave's entrance to see it already engulfed with water. With no sign of her fellow explorers, she made the bold decision to run 2.5 miles to the closest alarm. On arrival, rescue teams approached a haunting scene, rain constantly pouring down on an already flooded cave with people still trapped inside. They attempted to dig channels that would aid in the removal of some of the rain, but it unfortunately wasn't enough. With rescue only becoming possible after the rain passed, they were only able to recover them the next day. 5 out of the 6 members were found having drowned in the caves. It took teams an extra day to recover the last diver. A pattern I've noticed while researching these tragedies is the vital role that witnesses have played in alerting for help to better their partner's chances of survival, even if it seems helpless. In our next caving disaster, the messenger for help was nearly killed before even seeing the exit of the cave. Back in the US, specifically St. Paul, Minnesota, there resides an almost infamous cave for its tragedy. The Wabasha Street Caves were a hotspot for gangsters in the 1920s due to its discreet appearance during Prohibition. Stories of hauntings and ghosts with violent past were bound to surface. However, this would attract a large number of teens inexperienced with the dangers of exploring caves.
Our Jeff Wagner explains the challenges that recovery team faced and why exploring the caves could be deadly.
The Mississippi River Bluff caves in St. Paul can be dangerous and sometimes deadly.
Fire crews spent almost 3 hours trying to free the teens from a cave on the city's west side.
In 2004, a group of 4 teens would decide to explore these caves without any equipment, thinking it unnecessary. Ironically, they would ignore a sign warning about the dangers of the cave, which also included a tragic story of 2 teens passing in 1992 from carbon monoxide poisoning. As we could safely assume, this would be to their detriment. Not far into the caves, they began to feel lightheaded, dizzy, obviously the effects of carbon monoxide poisoning. Till, suddenly, the severity of their situation became hauntingly obvious. In a barely lucid state, the tragedy played like a dream to one of the teens, according to his statement. Waking up from seemingly passing out, the teen noticed 3 of his friends still unconscious in the caves. Feeling sick and barely conscious himself, he picked up one of his friends and made his way to the cave's exit. He successfully was able to contact help and save himself and one other friend. However, the other 2 had unfortunately passed from carbon monoxide poisoning about 600 feet from the cave's exit. Investigators say that the cave was at 750 parts per million with carbon monoxide. For reference, the World Health Organization recommends below 25 parts per million of carbon monoxide in a 1-hour period. Authorities have trouble closing the caves off due to the soft material composition of the rocks.
Block the caves, block the entrances, they find another way around, another way in, and that appears to be what happened here.
Mike Gade with the St. Paul Fire Department says it took 3 hours to rescue 2 teens this morning that went 100 feet down a cave ventilation shaft.
One could apparently dig a sizable hole using just keys if they wanted. There's something about being in a group that instills a slight sense of comfort. However, it's in situations like cave exploring that a healthy amount of caution and anxiety is imperative to one's safety. In other cases, by the time you've noticed, it may already be too late, like the story of the Nam Tulu cave disaster. In October 2007 in Thailand, a group of tourists explored the Nam Tulu caves that stretch up to 500 meters deep. With a tour guide leading the group deeper into the cave, everything was going just fine, until one of the survivors of this incident began to hear something terrifying. A flash flood had suddenly struck and the tunnels began to rapidly rise in their water levels. The guide and other members of the party were swept away by the current. The survivor of the story, Carol, and her boyfriend began to immediately climb higher into the cave. Clinging to safety, the couple would only witness the horror of their other explorers being swept away by the unforgiving current. Desperate for survival, her boyfriend tried to use the current to escape, only to sadly perish along with the others, a few of which were only just kids. Hours later, rescue was finally possible, and she was the only survivor of the group of the reported 8. As lucky as she was to escape such a horrific event, one can't even begin to imagine the pure terror that had occurred. For our final 2 stories, it'll almost share the same situation as Carol's. However, in this case, they would not be the fortunate ones to escape. By now, I'm sure many of you, if not all of you who have clicked on this video, are familiar with the Nutty Putty caving disaster. However, if not, I'll cover it, then tell one that I'm sure isn't as well known. Based off of what I've shared so far, it's a little interesting to me that the Nutty Putty caving disaster has as much infamy in caving incidences as it does. In 2009, cave explorer John Jones decided to explore the Nutty Putty caves in Utah, which stretch up to 1,355 feet. During this expedition, Jones had encountered a complex portion of the cave that quickly became trivial. In his best attempts to free himself, he wriggled his way only deeper into what he thought would be freedom. Instead, he only unfortunately wedged himself deeper into an almost vertical crevice. After this, he paged for help, and only within a few hours a team of 137 rescuers arrived on scene to extract John. Drilling, lubricating the cave walls, and cutting at them proved ineffective. However, a complex pulley system was used with some success. He was finally able to make eye contact with a nearby rescuer. However, this was a short-lived victory, as disaster struck again.
Authorities are considering shutting down a popular destination for adventurers. It's a cave which has now been declared a public hazard after a young father died inside. He was trapped in the deep cave and frantic rescuers managed to pull him to the surface, but then something went terribly wrong.
A piece of the rescue equipment had broken, and John fell right back down, even deeper this time, and from the sounds of his shallow breathing, the tragic event was unfortunately near its grim end. After 27 hours of their best efforts, a medical professional had declared John deceased on November 25th, 2009. The next day, it was declared too dangerous to recover his body, so for the safety of everyone, they closed down the system, and soon after, a plaque in his memory was placed by the cave for fellow explorers and his family to pay respects to. The combination of intense rescue efforts, extreme risk, and its tragic outcome have caused this event to leave a dark stain in cave diving history. However, what most may not know is that a similar situation occurred in South Africa back in 1984. A diver by the name of Peter Verhassel and his two friends set themselves to explore the Sterkfontein Caves in South Africa for its prehistoric remains. To put it into perspective, over 1/3 of all early hominid fossils were found from this exact cave. However, the purpose of their dive was actually to determine the cave's true depth. A safety guideline was set in place and the dive commenced. Throughout the dive, Peter, as the least experienced, stayed in the back. However, that didn't stop his curiosity from pulling him off course occasionally. Then usually, till he was alone and without a guideline. Stranded and low on oxygen underwater, Peter searched for a place to surface. Luckily, there was one nearby where he was able to successfully surface, but where was he now? Too low on oxygen and lost, he did the best thing he could in this case and waited patiently for help to arrive. Meanwhile, after some time, a rescue party was called and the search began in the complex prehistoric caves. Hours became days, then weeks, with no luck on his location. There, he remained on that underground beach for 6 weeks till some divers resumed the search after it had been suspended. Next to the main entrance, only 118 feet away from the searched areas, they came across a tunnel that led to an underground beach. Still there, the emaciated body of Peter was found along with a single message written in the sand. I love you, Cheryl and Ma. With the complex and sudden dangers that each of these stories display, we can hopefully prevent future catastrophes similar to this from transpiring, whether it be through warning others or intervening ourselves. Thank you all so much for watching. If you guys have enjoyed this, please feel free to leave a like down there below and don't forget to subscribe for more spooky content like this. I understand this was a bit of a darker video, but don't worry, I have a few funny, lighthearted videos in there that I'm sure that'll pop up on the screen right now. But as always, everybody, stay spooky. Bye-bye.